Hey, what is up guys, Kolst here. So we've been playing about a week now on the Forged in the Barrens meta. It's been an interesting time in Arena to say the least. Definitely a lot of crazy stuff going on. So a lot of that is due to the cards on this list. This is going to be the top 25 strongest cards in Arena right now. I tried to scrape all the data and really objectively analyze between all the classes exactly which cards are the strongest across all classes. Really hard to evaluate really these cards against each other, but I did my best. So in any case, let's get right into it. So number 25, we will start with, of course, our good old friend mor'shan Watchpost. Maybe it's surprising, I don't know, some people may be surprised to see it so high, some people may be surprised to see it so low. If I was just analyzing mor'shan Watchpost, assuming you had it on turn 2, turn 3, this card would probably be in the top 5, but you know, if you draw it later, it's not quite so unbelievable. So I think in the middle, it averages out right around here at number 25 on the list. But anyway, I've made enough videos about this card. Let's move on to something else. Number 24, we have Alexstrasza the Lifebinder, one of the new dragons in the core set. It's not the flashiest dragon, but really it's just so consistent. If you need to live, it'll heal you. If you just want to end the enemy hero, you can do that. You can destroy a minion for board control. It's just really flexible, and you know, you're never going to be unhappy to have this card. Next, moving on to number 23, we have Ace Hunter Kreen. This card is available at Demon Hunter and Hunter. Of course, basically it provides the advantage that if you have board, then you just get unbelievably more board. It also works really well with rush minions, also really well so that weapons don't take damage. It's just an extremely strong card, especially for Demon Hunter right now, given how strong they are at just doing everything, frankly, but taking board. Moving on to number 22, we have N'Zoth, God at the Deep. One of the older cards on this list, actually, but yeah, this is one where obviously it depends on your deck. Not every deck is going to be good, but you know, 10 mana, fill your board with potentially like 30-40 mana worth of stuff. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Not too much to say there. Moving on to a warrior card, we have Troublemaker. So this card, one of those cards which I've previously, I don't think I've ever made a video on Troublemaker, but you know, if I was making more videos, I would have made like a watch post video about Troublemaker. It's just one of those cards that, you know, if you don't kill it, you win the game. It just provides an unbelievable amount of sustained value, and on the turn you drop, it's just a whole lot of value. So it's just really good. But the crazy thing is that this card's frankly just been getting overpowered by other cards. Its only weakness really is that it doesn't really protect the hero, so sometimes you can just ignore it and destroy the hero. But let's move on to even more powerful cards. Number, I completely lost track. Are we at, I think we're at 19. This is Draconic Studies. So maybe a bit of a surprising card potentially to see on the list, but essentially the dragon pool is just so insane now, especially because of one particular dragon, but also one or two others that are on this list, and one or two that didn't make this list. I'll just say like Deathwing, for example, didn't even make this list. But yeah, like just the ability to get the super insane dragons, it just provides such unbelievable value. And not only that, but being able to play them a turn early potentially just makes this card unbelievably consistent. You're basically going to be choosing between 3 really good options almost always, so really crazy. Next we have another warrior card. It is Outrider's Axe. So this card is not the flashiest card on the list, but really it just does way too much for a card. It's 4 mana, 3/3 weapon, which honestly isn't even that bad of a card as is. Wouldn't be something you'd be super excited about, but then it also pretty much unconditionally draws you 3 cards. So it's just extremely strong. If you really just want 9 face damage, it can be 9 face damage. You know, that's like the worst case scenario. It's just really it does way too much. And the condition is really just not hard to meet typically. This, the only time it would be really annoying is if you really want to have to pop a Divine Shield with it, but otherwise you pretty much always trigger it. But yeah, moving on to the next card list, we have the Warlock card, Soul Rend, one of the new ones. Basically the best AoE ever printed. I want to say, well, except for one, which we'll get to later. But yeah, deal 5 damage to all minions. It has a downside, which actually, if you have the right Warlock deck, can actually be an upside. And really critical thing right now is that it kills watch posts. Then that's actually really important too. It's one of the best answers, if not the best answer in the game to watch posts. So really powerful, honestly, I think largely because of that. Moving on to, I think the only pure hunter card on this list, we have Rinling's Rifle. 4 mana 2/2 weapon, but the power of the weapon is, of course, after hero attacks, discover a secret and cast it. This is a card that was actually one of the best cards in the game last set, but also just, you know, a card that benefited from some of the bad hunter secrets going away. Although I will say, like, actually, like, Misdirection sometimes was the one you would actually want. You would never draft it, but that was actually one you like to get off of this one sometimes because it would be right in the situation, you know. But it's another one of those cards that just does way too much, essentially. Next one on the list, a Shaman Legendary, Inara Stormcrash. This is a card that I think some people probably underestimated initially and maybe still do. It's just that it's another card that just does way too much. Of course, if you happen to have a big weapon equipped, I don't think Shaman really has any big weapons right now, probably because they printed this card so they couldn't print any big weapons while this exists. But yeah, it just provides an absolutely obscene amount of value. It just does a lot, and if it sticks around, it's that continuous threat as well. Moving on to, I think, the only druid card on this list, we have Arbor Up. Of course, so it's 5 mana for 2 4/3s with Treants, which is somewhat relevant sometimes, and also buff your entire board with +2/+1. Buffing your entire board with +2/+1 would probably be like a 3 mana effect, I want to say. So then it's a 3 mana effect, and it also summons 2 4/3s, which are like 3 drops. So it's another, again, example where it just does way too much for one card. Pretty much it there. So moving on to a Warlock Legendary, we have Keli'dan the Breaker. So it could be surprising that I did not put Brittlebone Destroyer on this list, but I do put Keli'dan in. And the reason is because even though Brittlebone might be a little bit more flexible, sometimes you want a life tap, sometimes you don't. But this effect, that it's sometimes a Twisting Nether, is often relevant. If you have the right deck for it, that is like the reason you actually pick that card. To just get the surprise Twisting Nether turn 6, turn 7, whatever, it can really save you some games. But of course, if it's just 6 mana, 3/3 kill a minion, that's also already really good as well. Moving on to another card, which is, again, one of the least flashy cards on this list, but extremely powerful, is, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, Cariel Roame, or Roame. Basically, it's just a 4 mana 4/3 Rush Divine Shield, which really is just way too much. And of course, depending on if you happen to have a bunch of holy spells, that's being able to reduce the cost is amazing. But honestly, it's already really good just as a 4/3 Rush Divine Shield. I mean, that's close to like a 6 mana card. Maybe not anymore, maybe it's more like 5, but it just does way too much for one card, essentially. Oh, and there is also the fact that since it survives its first attack, if you don't lose it, you can keep getting this discount repeatedly. So it's also a threat that they absolutely have to kill as well. So moving on to a class we are all familiar with in the last week, Demon Hunter, we have Illidari Inquisitor. This is a card I initially misjudged on my initial review because I just did not assume they would print this card, because I was like, oh, this is a weird effect. Oh, and then I realized it goes face and you're like, oh. So it's basically Inner Demon on an 8/8 rush stick. Just the best finisher in Arena, I think, that they've ever printed, and it's not even close. It's just, it does an absolutely large amount, and you know, frankly, I mean, this is when we're starting to get to the point in the list where you're like, maybe this card just shouldn't exist in Arena, just for power level reasons, because it just does so much. Moving on to another Demon Hunter card, which I think some people might be surprised I put it this low on the list, actually, but we have Cycle of Hatred. So the reason I have it actually relatively this low is that compared to some of these other hyper premium cards, Cycle is at least a little bit situational. You can't always get value out of it. I know you almost always can, but like it's not always perfect on Kerps. So, but obviously I don't think I have to explain too much the power level of this card. I think enough people have seen it enough times by now, especially in the last week, that we can all appreciate that. So moving on to, I believe we're in the top 10 by this point. Let me see. That was number 10, I think. So now number 9, we have Shaman Legendary Lurker Below. Kind of interesting comparison to Cycle of Hatred, but Lurker Below, I'm giving a bit of an edge to just because it is more consistent. I guess it used to be, you know, you're like, at worst case, it's a Fire Elemental. It's like, well, I guess not anymore. Fire Elemental got buffed, but yeah, it's just, this card's never going to be bad, and yeah, just for its ceiling isn't quite as high as Cycle of Hatred, but its floor is a lot lower as well, so that's where I put it. So we'll move on to, I guess, I said this is number 7 now, right? I don't know, doesn't matter. We have G'huun the Blood God, a priest legendary, basically an 8-mana 8/8, which draws 2 cards, and the only condition on it really is that you need to have not taken a bunch of damage, and then they cost 0 mana. And it used to be a little awkward when you would draw Mind Control off of this, because then you're like, ooh, I mean, 0 mana Mind Control, but also 10 health, Self Pyroblast, huh? Now you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's great. But yeah, it's one of those cards that really has high potential to just straight up win the game by itself, even more than some of these like reactive answers. So that's basically the reason why it's so high on this list. Number 7, we have Instructor Fireheart. 3 mana 3/3 Battlecry. Discover a spell that costs 1 or more. If you play this turn, repeat this effect. So there are a lot of Shaman spells that cost pretty low mana, and you get Discover, so you can just choose. The idea is you choose a bunch of cheap spells, and then you end on a spell you actually want, hopefully. But yeah, you often want to wait until you have pretty much close to 10 mana, if not 10 mana, and then just you get like 4 spells off of this. It just provides, again, way too much. And if you really need something early, you can also fish for it early. You know, might get that turn 6 Lightning Storm or something, right? So it's just an extremely versatile and powerful card. Moving on to, I think, the last non-Demon Hunter, non-legendary on this list. We have Hammer the Naaru. So again, just a card the Paladin has that just does way too much. And compared to some of the other cards, it even covers up its own weakness. So right, it's a weapon. If you need it to just be 9 face damage, it could be 9 face damage. But it's just an obscene amount of board control. And the weakness of a weapon, right, is you take damage, but it gives you a taunt to protect you from future damage. And it's just, the 6/6 taunt is already pretty good for 6 mana, and you just get, you know, 9 free damage for, I don't know why, but yeah. Just way too much for one card, making it extremely powerful. Moving on to number 6 on the list, the last one before the top 5, we have the Priest Legendary Soulmere. Remember when I mentioned Soul Rend earlier, I was like, oh, the best 8/8. Oh wait, except for this one, basically. So yeah, Soulmere is basically just a one-sided complete board clear. Sometimes it could be a little bit awkward, limiting its potential a little bit, but I mean, it just does extremely well. And sometimes in some very niche situations, it's even better because you get synergy out of your opponent's minions. Sometimes not, but yeah, it's just extremely versatile and powerful. All we need to say there. Moving on to the top 5, we have Demon Hunter card. It is Coilfang Warlord. Card that I think a lot of people weren't even aware was in Arena until a week ago, frankly, or 2 weeks ago when 20.0 hit and some of these Demon Hunter cards got put to normal appearance rate when they've normally been almost absent from Arena. This is an 8 mana 9/5 rush, which can sometimes even value trade, but oftentimes you'll want to kill something huge with this. And then you just get a 5/9 taunt, which would be like a 6, it would be like a 7 drop, right? Maybe, I don't know, it'd be a little weak for a 7 drop now, but yeah, it's like a 6/7 drop. So it's just, again, like an Assassinate with a 5/9 taunt. It's just so much value. It's one of the higher value cards in the game. Just does way too much. Moving on to number 4 on the list. One of my favorites, as long as it's not played against me, and maybe a controversial pick to have quite so high on this list, but people that have been watching my videos will know exactly why. We have Silas Darmoon. So yeah, one of the more interesting, I guess the most unique card probably on this list. But yeah, it's basically 7 mana Mind Control,
now that mind control doesn't exist anymore. It's quite unique. But yeah, oftentimes I think the reason people underrated this card so much was that people just thought it would be way more inconsistent than it is. But the reality is like if your opponent is investing a huge amount of mana into a large minion, they don't even have, first of all, they're not even going to be thinking about this card because it's a legendary and you don't see it often. But even more than that, it's just the fact that they spent so much mana on that minion, they probably don't even have the ability to play around this. So if you're playing like a super slow greedy deck, you might actually fall behind and, you know, they might actually have the ability to play around this. But, you know, especially with how I play in a slightly more aggressive style, you can like almost 100% of the time steal anything on your opponent's board with this. And oftentimes you don't need to get anything that big. If you're playing like a value matchup and you just steal a Smug Senior, that's such an unbelievable value swing. It just wins you the game. Of course, you can see one of my recent videos for a 12-0 involving this card, but yeah. Just had to talk about that card a little bit more because, you know, reasons. Let's move on to top 3, number 3 on the list. The last non-legendary on the list. We have, of course, a Demon Hunter card. It is Expendable Performers. One thing I've noticed in the win rates with this card is that this card does go down a little bit when Demon Hunter isn't insanely broken. But because the function of this card is basically at turn 7, whenever Demon Hunter wants it, they just are winning the board. There's pretty much, it's nearly impossible to set up a board that doesn't get cleared by this. Unless you have like literally 15 mana to do it. So yeah, essentially when Demon Hunter is weaker, then sometimes you could play this card and still lose. But Demon Hunter gets so much value right now. They have so many powerful tools that if they're winning the board on turn 7, they just win. So makes it, especially now. Maybe if I made the list in a different time, I would have this card a couple slots lower, but right now it's like one of the best cards in the game. Moving on to number 2, where I think you get in the conversation of cards that really just, why do they exist level of power, even more than some of the last ones I mentioned. We have a card which is very potentially maybe announced to be nerfed very soon, if it hasn't happened already by the time I release this video. It is Jandis Barov. So this is a card that got significantly better. It was already insanely broken and got significantly better due to the core set rotation, removing a lot of bad 5-drops from the pool. So now there's so many 5-drops that have rush or taunt or have some other kind of effect, and it's just, you get absolutely obscene amount of value. Just as a baseline, getting like, you know, if you just get like, imagine a low roll, you get like a 4-4 and a 3-3 off of this. Well, it's a 4-4 and a 3-1 and a 2-1. That's already like 7 mana worth of stuff right there, you know. So I mean, if you have this on curve, it's actually like mor'shan Watchpost is a card I actually compared to this card. Like this mor'shan Watchpost is like not quite as good as this card on curve. This card is like even better than mor'shan Watchpost if you have it on curve. So it's just absolutely way too much for one card, and if you see it early, you are very likely to lose. So what is the last card on a list, you wonder? I mean, should be pretty obvious, I think, to everyone paying any attention to the game, and it is, of course, Murloc Tinyfin. I mean, 0 cost, 1/1 in stats, you divide 1 by 0, and that's infinity. It's infinite value. I mean, obviously, man. I mean, okay, no. Of course, it's Ysera the Dreamer. So Ysera the Dreamer is just a card that is absolutely bonkers. If you're not aware, so it's related to the old Ysera. Instead of the 5 dream cards you used to get, you would get one of them. Now you get all 5 instantly. So there were a couple changes to the dream cards. Nightmare is only +4/+4. Awakens is now 3 mana, but does not hit heroes, which is very critical. Laughing Sister's 2 mana. I think Drake is the same. And Dream is now 1 mana, but it only works on enemies. They had to do that because if Ysera could dream itself, it would literally be infinite value, and it would just, it would go from almost impossible to being like actually impossible to lose after playing this card. So yeah, it's just an absolutely insane amount of value. Imagine if you have Shadow Step. So compared to a lot of the other like really strong win conditions, like Troublemaker, for instance, or what's a slightly higher value example, or even like Illidar Inquisitor, just anything that would like generate sustained value. At least when someone plays like a Troublemaker or something, you can kill the Troublemaker and then it's over, right? thing is, Ysera has already gotten all its value. So against Troublemaker, you'll say like, well, you can kill the Troublemaker, you can kill the hero. You have 2 ways to win the game if you aren't completely dead. I guess Ysera's already done its job. The 412 doesn't really matter anymore. It'll still value trade, and you can even nightmare it if you want. But basically, once they played Ysera, you lose unless you kill the hero. And because the Awakens doesn't hit the hero's own face anymore, you're not gonna be able to win the board anymore because of all this stuff with the dream, and it just becomes extremely, extremely difficult unless you're just unbelievably far ahead in value to the point where you can just weather the storm from this. And I think that might be the way you kind of have to try to counteract with it, is just try to get your opponent to use these tools a little cheaply. But then, you know, they're going to play an Emerald Drake and a Laughing Sister, so you're going to have a really tough time after they play this card. But yeah, I guess so that's my list. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. What do you guys think? I'm sure pretty much everyone would have some kind of disagreements over this. So don't think I mentioned in the beginning some honorable mentions of cards that just were not quite good enough, just from the neutral set. There were so many. There were like probably another like easily 25 cards I probably could have put on this list, but just for some ideas, like some neutrals that just didn't quite make it. Keymaster Alabaster, Venomous Scorpid was actually surprisingly close. Maybe not too surprisingly close, it's really good. Deathwing the Destroyer, Barongeddon, Maiev. These are just some examples, and there's so many class examples I can't even really begin to list them. But yeah, sure, leave in the comment section which cards you would have put in this list, which cards you think should have been way higher, way lower, or whatever. But yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell. That's important, apparently. You get notified whenever I make a new video. Of course, don't forget to check us out on Twitch if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for hanging out, everyone. We'll see you guys next time.